image is this outsider, this male entering this, this place of women that is not inviting to him. No one's, lending him a hand to kind of guide him inside. He is an outsider in this space. And what does he do? He immediately underestimates everyone in there, and thinks he's smarter than everyone. And so, and there is this kind of like, these we know they're witches, but no one's really said it in this first episode. We there are all these family secrets that we're not privy to yet, and it kind of makes us ask different questions about the characters in a different way. Particularly because we are aligned with Rowan, who is also kind of in the dark in the beginning as well. So I just found it was a very interesting way into the story that framed it in a much more different way for the viewer. And we really are like stepping into a new world, and I want to know what the secrets are, which is interesting because it's modern day, and I feel like I'm in a completely different planet.
Really cool
Ashley, let's get to the next tab.
I was just saying, it's really cool that we get to go on that journey with Rowan. Like, she's in the same place we are as the viewer, especially if you haven't read the books. You don't know what's going on at all, so it's fun to be going on that journey together.
Actually, about that. Right. About that, I actually very, very recently I was talking to someone I'm writing with about the narrative device of like discovering a world through a character that knows nothing about it, and that really is what helps you from having like info dumps. And I really enjoy also the way that they work the flashbacks in, because they work them in a way that made it into a mystery where you want to know, like they don't give you all the information, and that's what gets you waiting for the next episode essentially.
This is a great question and a good segue from there. What is the Mayfair Witches saying by associating witchcraft with femininity? First and foremost, for all of my years growing up, I thought you couldn't have a male witch. I thought if it was a witch that was a boy or a man, that was a wizard or a sorcerer or something, right? A witch was specifically a female title, or warlock. There you go, warlock. I mean, they even made a movie, in the late 80s or the early 90s, or they made a couple of them, I think, Warlock, 3 in a row. Anyway, my understanding was that was specifically a female title, a woman's title. And it's interesting, as I got a little older and I began to like research the history of the witchcraft trials and all of these things, and you realize, it was effectively a title for any woman who caused a problem, basically for all of history. And occasionally that was a worse thing to do than in other times, but it was never pleasant. And it was almost always used as a pejorative or even as a title that led to punishment, depending upon, again, what era you're in. But I do think this isn't something that Anne Rice does alone. In her novels here about the Mayfair family, where it's a matriarchal family, the money, the power in the family, all of the control of the legacies and all of the foundations, etc., goes to the daughter, the eldest daughter. And there's only effectively one male in the entire history of the family who has any authority, which is Julian. We haven't seen him so far in the show. I don't know if we're going to, at least in season 1. But I don't think that's an Anne Rice specific thing. I think that's not just the Mayfair Witches. I think that's witchcraft in general is sort of the feminine. So why is that, Ashley? Does it just come down to we've lived in a patriarchal society for 10,000 years plus, and so we needed a label for uppity women? Like, what's the deal?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think replace witch with bitch, and you get pretty much that's the deal.
I'm doing that in something I'm writing.
I mean. Oh, that's awesome! It's so true. I mean, it's one of those things that, like, Joel's known me since I was in my early 20s, and there's no way my ass would not have gotten burned at the stake back in the day.
Same.
And it's just like that well-behaved women never make history kind of concept, and it's any woman that's a little bit different could be considered a witch, or anyone that has a different type of energy. And I think that's why it's really cool. That's something about Julian in this world, is that he is such an interesting character. He's kind of got a non-binary quality to him as well, and as a result, you kind of get this introduction as of a different type of witch, which I love that it's included, that he's included or in the story. But yeah, I do think it's just mainly it's because of that whole long history of it being a pejorative, being, you know, a witch is a bitch is a witch.
Talk to me a little bit about,
Yes.
the gender fluid nature of witchcraft, and does that, I mean, do you think that that is inherent in witchcraft and following Wicca or mysticism? Is the idea of being able to sort of blend between the two genders and live in that space between, is that helpful? Does that add to your magic?
I think I have my right now I have my girlfriend on Zoom who's giving me emotional support doing like this with her hand. But um actually I was when it comes to witchcraft as something associated with femininity, I've gone back and forth about it a lot because is it associated with, because this is interesting because I've heard people associated with the female bodied. And so someone like me who was assigned female at birth, who grew up being regarded by society as a woman, um, and and then sort of took a step back and tried to decide, okay, where do I fall within this, would belong in a space, if in the space of witchcraft. If you listen to other people, they will tell you that witchcraft is exclusive to the feminine and the trans feminine, and so someone like me would not belong there, because I took a step away from femininity rather than a step towards femininity. And there are very like, and at the end there are many interpretations of it. Some of them can get quite gatekeepy. um, but I honestly think that when it comes to it, I do think that it is for the marginalized at the end of the day. And much like we, as a community in the LGBT community, we reclaim the world queer, that we reclaim the word queer that was a slur for a very long time. Reclaim and then as we reclaimed it, we made it into an umbrella term that ended up including many people that would not have been described by the word queer when it was used as a slur. I would not have probably been described by the word queer like 50 years ago. I am now. The same can go for witch, where like when it was a slur, it was directed at women specifically. Again, what at the time was perceived as a woman, which we don't know what they would define themselves as today. Today, we can use it as an umbrella term that can include many different people who are marginalized in other ways that became relevant later over time.
I
Hell yeah.
love that. Yes.
Every
That's
bit of that.
empowering for
Every
everybody.
damn bit of that. Love it.
Yeah, that's a great distinction between like, what makes a witch. Is it the person calling you one, or is it you sort of declaring that you are one and kind of seizing your power and sort of like tapping into that? And can those two things ever like exist on the same plane? And and I think doing just like a simple like little research on witches on EnglishHeritage.org.uk. You go into this thing of like, witches sort of just being defined as dark cosmic forces and like Circe and the Odyssey. And then when, Christianity comes into play, that's when it really starts getting more personified. And it still is more like nature into the earth, but the first sort of like personified witch is this like winter hag who's supposed to like represent like your sort of crops, good fortune over the winter. And then, as a Massachusetts girly, I grew up learning all about the Salem witch trials, and that, what's so funny about there is that it's defined as this like mass hysteria where all these men are roping all these women up and burning them at the stake. And, we all know where the word hysteria comes from. So it is just interesting, sort of like, the labeling is what makes a witch, but then there is still this thing we call witchcraft and mysticism that is still so rich to explore.
I think that's one of the reasons why
right on, Liz.
we as we as young women are kind of all drawn to it. Like there's a big joke and the big internet joke about like women in their 20s all go through their witch phase. But I think that that's one of the reasons why we're so drawn to it is because it is empowering. It is taking back something that can be used against you and turning it on its head. And it is an opportunity to explore yourself and your ambition and your desires and your need for connection in a different way. And I think that especially for someone like me who is not at all connected to organized religion, like a Wiccan spirit really appeals to me. That whole concept is really appealing to me, and I think that that's one of the reasons why it does become why it is sort of a femme ideal. But I'll be damned if anyone's gatekeeping being a witch, bitch. We ain't
Well,
doing
I
it.
mean, so there, I do think there is inherently the issue of like the mystery of menstruation, right, for the male populace. And so anyone who menstruates is immediately put into this box of like, oh, they do this insane thing which doesn't make any sense to us, and we don't know where it comes from or what it's for, or
Go down to
they
the
could just
river,
get
you're
pregnant
filthy.
anytime. Yes, exactly, right. And especially if you go into, not even, you don't have to go to like Stone Age man. Again, go just 200 or 300 years into the past, and you can sort of begin to understand. I mean, you guys didn't give it much thought, but I understand why this was so troubling to you, right? So there's this cloud that forms inherently just from nature by the separation of the genders in this way, that these people have this issue every month, and these people can bring forth life, and these people can't, right? And the fact that women can take that, mystery or disgusting idea in the mind of a man and instead turn it into and really focus on the creative power of it, right? You're gods among the rest of us little peons in that we can't create anybody. You can. In fact, in the modern time, you can do it without us. So that inherently makes the femininity, excuse me, a witchy thing. And I think that's where a lot of this comes from: the mistrust of women, the structural issues in society to keep you out of power. I think it's about we're scared. We're scared if you ever got power, we would never get it back.
Right. It's also just a way of like the word femininity. It's like it's a reductive word to describe something that is not so simple.
Yes,
I agree with that, because as someone who does not relate with femininity as a concept, at least the way it's portrayed in society today, I am, on the other hand, I'm very interested in the future in having children. So that, like the two things don't necessarily need to go together. But back onto what Joel was saying earlier, I've talked to let's say an important male figure in my life who's told me very clearly, like, I put so much effort into my work and my career because I cannot create life the way that women can create, and this is always going to be something that I consider as like my being lacking in, like something that I consider like I need to make up for to justify my place in the world.
Absolutely. And listen, like, I am a father. I mean, I've had my part in creation of 4 little lives. They're all awesome human beings, but there is an
They
inherently
are.
a disconnect between me and them versus each one of them and their mother. And that's not because I'm not a good dad or I'm not involved on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I work from all the time. They see me as
Yeah.
much as they see mom, and I'm involved.
They
I'm
stick at
funny,
you,
and
Joel.
yeah, the whole 9 yards. But they didn't come from me, right? And that is just, it's a barrier that is inherently humbling in some ways. And I think a lot of men, particularly men who have like a machismo, negative masculinity aspects to their personality, I think that very, very much comes from an inferiority complex. We cannot leave a
Yeah.
legacy in the same way that a woman can. Ashley, let's move to the next slide here. We're going to derail this slightly into a discussion gender politics in a way that I didn't think we meant to. Should witchcraft be gendered? Let's vote on that, everybody. You can vote yes or no, and in just a couple of minutes, Ashley will tick the little timer down, and that'll lock in everybody's vote. We'll move on to the next thing. But I think Az made the best possible argument for this. It shouldn't be gendered, and it shouldn't be marked off. Access to these higher cosmic energies is for everybody, just like expression of your own self is for everybody. And if you express yourself in a way that has traditionally been locked down for men or masculine figures, that's no more fair to you than it is to me. And I say this all the time: it is a freaking shame that makeup isn't an option for me. Like, I'm fairly butch. I am bisexual. I discovered in the past year for myself. This is a newfound thing for me in my 40s here. But even so, I'm fairly butch and masculine presenting, and yet I think, boy, it'd be cool if I could just like wear nail polish when I wanted to, or a little mascara from time to time. I don't know that I would want to do that. I don't know how to do it, so it wouldn't look good if I put it on now. But it's a shame in our situation, in our society, that it's not open to everybody. And so I say, for my kids' generation, it should be. Yeah,
it's getting to be actually. I was the reason why for a very long time I struggled to call myself non-binary, and I don't want to derail the conversation too much, but it was because I was concerned. I was like, well, but am I just like, I strongly believe that you can be a man and a masculine man and still do things that are not like gender conforming, or a woman and fully consider yourself a woman and be masculine without that affecting actually your gender identity or whether you're non-binary or not. So I actually like there's a lot of overlap right now when it comes to gender expression. It's something that I'm really enjoying and finding.
Well, and there are definitely characters in this story to get it back slightly on track. Go ahead, Ashley. I'm sorry.
Right. But I just want to say that Joel and I owe people our age, because we're a little older, elder millennial, like cuss Gen X, and it's what younger millennials and Gen Z have done for us is to make us even more comfortable with our expression of gender. And it's a beautiful, cool thing that I'm seeing amongst my friends that are my age. They feel, like Joel said, you feel more comfortable in expressing yourself in a way that maybe you didn't feel comfortable 10 years ago, and thank God for younger people, because they keep us growing and learning, and they keep us aware of what we can be. We get to where we forget what the possibilities in the world are. And I think that's something so grateful. If you don't have younger people than you in your life, you're missing the fucking boat big time.
Absolutely. Everyone should have some younger folks in their life to sort of help spur you along. Remind you every now and then you ought to be uncomfortable about somebody else's in your close circle's life choices. You should be like, really, you're going to do that? It keeps you honest, honestly. Ashley, let's move to the next tab here. But I just wanted to mention, I don't think we're going to see a lot of it this season. But to tie this back to the Mayfair specifically, the gender fluidity issue, we do have those characters in these books. And I think, especially in a season 2, when we meet Julian, which surely they're not going to write him out of the story. When we meet Julian, especially, Mary Beth also, both those characters go in drag commonly in their adventures that we see in the storyline. They don't have the words in their time period. I think Julian is like the late 1800s to the early 1900s, and Mary Beth about the same period. They don't have the language to describe themselves as gender fluid or non-binary, or maybe even gay or queer. But
that's a big one,
right? But Julian has multiple same-sex relationships as well as heterosexual relationships, and again, dresses as a woman on occasion. Mary Beth dresses as a man quite a lot and goes about in New Orleans society. So I think we can get to that eventually in this show. All right, let's get back on track here a little bit. Let's talk about the history of witchcraft. And this is one, Az, that I really want to dig into with you, because the history of witchcraft is obviously clearly associated with femininity. But I wanted to circle back a little bit to the Jewish connection for you and the Jewish mysticism that is, an area of expertise for you. I didn't have that understanding as a kid that religion could coexist with mysticism and magic, as it were. So talk a little bit about your entry to that and how you understood that and how you first began to dive into that world.
Well, it does, and it doesn't coexist, because it very much depends on what you mean by coexisting. It's very often different factions of the same, like in a niche in the community, and it's very often frowned upon by the community at large. It's really hard without getting in the nitty-gritty of Jewish text, but basically, if you look at Jewish text as like multiple volumes that happened over history, and you look at like the volumes that the books that more than others frown upon, what they call sorcery, that would be focused in the Talmud. Now the Talmud has a strong Christian influence. The Talmud the Talmud has been defined by many people that I greatly respect as Jewish fan fiction, as Bible fan fiction. So whether it's canon or not is debatable.
Canon. Oh yeah.
They've been described as a Bible fan fiction. And there is a lot of stuff there about sorcery that absolutely does not fall in line with what I was talking about earlier, which is everything is of God. There is this distinction between good and bad. But when you go about religion, when you go about Jewish religion, I consider mysticism everything that has. So when you think of the Kabbalah, which by the way happens like after the Talmud, not only that, but when you look at the Kabbalah, technically, originally, you could not teach or even read the Kabbalah until you were like 40 and already well-versed in everything that came in Judaism before that. So very much gatekept, not the case anymore, but very, very closed off to people. And you had to be like a Jewish scholar, basically, to even have access to that. But when you go, what Kabbalah means, what the word means is tradition. So when you look at Jewish mysticism, you look into Jewish tradition, and you look at you look at the rituals, you look at the ritualistic aspects of the religion, and you realize that the reason they're there is because it's a lot easier to teach good things to a population through ritual than it is through quantifying how much good that thing will bring to them. So when you look into, for example, the Ten Commandments and all of the laws about what Jews can and cannot eat, it all falls in line with nomadic people that did not have refrigeration and did not have like basic hygiene in many cases. The reason why you can't eat shellfish as a Jew is not because of some higher power getting angry at you for eating shellfish, but because at a time with no refrigeration, eating shellfish was a health hazard. And the way that Jewish tradition ritualized that, made it pass on as this: if you do X, Y, and Z, this results in a positive outcome. I am not going to be able to quantify how or why, but it works, and you should continue doing it. And I believe that everything that is magical ritual today is, in a way, something that we understand as a community. It works, we just don't know how to explain or quantify how or why. If you look also at other like branches of Judaism, another example, my girlfriend here is miming the washing hands. Jews need to wash hands before eating meals. And at the time, people couldn't really quantify how much good it would do to you or why it would do good to you. They just observed that if you do X, then Y is the result. And I really do think that when it comes to a lot of magical practice today is really like, especially I'm seeing a lot on the internet, things that resonate to young generations, which are usually rituals that have a lot to do with self-care and giving yourself a break and slowing down. We find this in Judaism. Judaism is the first religion that institutionalized having a day off.
The Sabbath. Yes, that's what I was going to say. So like the Sabbath, the Sabbath was, I thought, I was hoping you were going to get there, as the Sabbath is something. So, okay, when I was like 6, 7 years old, barely understanding any concepts of, good or evil or morality, or like these concepts of eternity that I was trying to be expected to understand and everything. This was one of my first questions for my father, is like, well, what is the Sabbath? You guys keep talking about this, one of the 10 commandments, you got to keep the Sabbath and, keep it holy, et cetera, et cetera. He's like, God understood we needed a day off. It was hard. You got to be out there tilling the land and earning your food literally every day. We have to set aside a day. And if left to our own devices, we won't. And at the time, I thought, well, that's silly. You go to your job and everybody takes Saturday and Sunday off. First of all, that not everybody has a job like that, right? I mean, I run my own business, and I find myself now, it's something I talk to my kids all the time. I'm like, I don't want to work every day. It's a bad practice. And yet I don't really know how to not do that exactly. I've got to figure out this schedule better. And you think of these people, a nomadic people, 6,000, 8,000 years ago, whatever. And you're like, how does a higher power, or even just a very wise person that's over the tribe, how do you explain to these people, you got to take a day off every now and again?
Another,
like, verboten.
Right.
You go to Israel, and what you see is that you are, as a company, if you're open on Saturday, you get fined. You have to pay higher taxes.
I love that.
Seriously? That's amazing.
Yes, you are. Public transit does not work, and what works instead are a non-Jewish private. They're sort of minivans that like act as taxis on weekends, and for 24 hours, that's the only public transportation that there is. And if you are a company, so for example, we have a lot. I haven't lived there in forever, but. They have a line of supermarkets that is open on Saturdays, and they have higher prices because they have to pay a fine to being open on Saturday.
You have to find a bunch of people that aren't practicing, et cetera, to work. It's
exactly. Another element of mainstream Jewish religion, very mainstream Jewish religion, that I can very easily compare to element of mysticism, cross-cultural element of mysticism, in fact, is sacrifice. So our highest of the highest holidays is the Yom Kippur, which is a day where you sacrifice. You don't eat, you don't drink, and it's a moment of self-reflection, and there's this understanding that you get something for sacrificing, and the higher the value of what it is that you sacrifice, the more you can gain from it. And as someone who's kept it for many years, the kind of almost delirious introspection and like train of thought that can happen when you haven't eaten in 24 hours or drank water in 24 hours is intense, but like it's something that I don't regret doing. But always coming back to the fact of like, at the end, all of these rituals need to come to something positive. Another element of Judaism is that you cannot do this against your own health. So as important as it is to keep Yom Kippur, if you're pregnant, you can't do it. If you're sick, you can't do it. If you're over a certain age, you can't do it. If you're under a certain age, you can't do it. And
that's fascinating.
And I see a lot. And this again, this is like the most structured and against sorcery like part of the Jewish tradition. Still accept that sacrifice is an important element of religion. That ritual is a huge element of religion.
It is.
Not to compare or belittle religion by aligning it with pop culture, but there's the line in the very first Thor movie from the MCU where Thor is talking to Jane Foster, and he says, any science sufficiently advanced is going to seem like magic to you, right? And it's the same thing with, we think about UFOs or alien civilizations. If we were to interact with a society or a civilization that was significantly advanced enough, it would just seem like magic to us. So for me, the idea of witchcraft or witches, or mysticism in general, you very much can just chalk it up to, if you're not a supernatural person, you could say, maybe they got the code of the universe, right? Like maybe they're hacking a little bit, and you can hack too if you know the rules.
It's just men being like, women are so sophisticated and mysterious, like they must be witches. It's like a creation myth. It's like
she must be a witch.
Yeah, it's like we have to come up with, a simple explanation for this miracle. Thank you, Jess.
Thank you, Jess.
For the ladies.
Maybe it's Maybelline. Maybe it's witchcraft.
Oh, another, always making a parallel with fiction. Someone I know was telling me today that they play an RPG game where there's this entire race of people who are going through a technological dark age, and they have these religious figures in their society that all they have is that they have manuals to technology, and so they become priests because they have access to the scriptures, and thanks to these scriptures they can do things. And so that is very interesting, and like it's all a matter of like where are you and what you need to achieve and who can make it happen for you.
Well, I mean, for so much of European history
there.
Yeah, for so much of European history, the ability to read was held behind the clergy. Unless you were a high-level merchant or an elite or a member of the clergy, you didn't get to learn how to read, and nobody had a Bible, until Gutenberg, effectively. And that's when.
Well, Jesus, there are still countries where women are allowed to read now.
Oh yeah, imagine my shock. Imagine my shock when I had only read the Ten Commandments in Italian in the context of Italian Catholic schools, and then I finally learned how to read Hebrew, and I read the Ten Commandments, and I realized that there's no such thing as sinful thought. What?
Religion and translation is a whole other
yeah.
Oh, let's tie this back a little bit.
We could do a whole
to the Mayfairs
10-hour chat on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's tie this back a little bit to the Mayfairs here, because I do think this TV series adaptation especially is very much going to delve into the questions of power and morality. Carlotta, the older aunt here who, gives Deidre's baby away at the end, gives Rowan away, clearly is against Lasher and the powers that this family manifests. And yet, if you read the books, Carlotta's got power of her own. I think there are two things that are at play in the Mayfair family here. There's the power that these women hold, or this family holds, the ability to manipulate the universe, as it were, in whatever way that is. And then there's their connection to Lasher. Lasher has malevolent, evil intentions, and I think that's pretty clear even in this first episode of the show. And it's definitely clear early on in the books. These women, the power that they hold is not inherently evil. And in fact, even the Mayfairs, even with the influence of Lasher over the years, have done lots of good things with it. And I think that exploration, the question of using power, even mystic power, for good ends, is going to very much play into Rowan's journey, specifically in this story. Are there any good other examples of pop culture challenging this cliche of only witchcraft only being for women, or witchcraft only being for evil?
People in the chat
someone brought up Jedi. Someone brought up Jedi in the chat, which is
Go ahead, Ashley.
Doctor Strange. Did I freeze up?
No. I was clearing the lane for you. You talk a little bit about the Jedi.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. No, I was just saying
a male-dominated hierarchy there.
Right. Like, if you want to look at a male-dominated kind of aspect of that, the Jedi are a great example. It's a lot of mystical power, a lot of focusing your energy on certain things in certain ways. Like, that's a really good example of, not that we need to come up with examples of pop culture, like celebrating men, but it is important to talk about different ways of expressing witchcraft and expressing, especially, I think we always think about our trans and non-binary family when we're looking at that. We want to make sure there needs to be good examples of that, more so than men. I think more so than masculine, definitely masculine embracing characters. But that's just
I was just going to say, talk to us about the representation across gender in Arcana. Arcana's not a IP that Ashley and I know nearly as well as you do, obviously. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Let me open the floodgates.
You look so happy.
So
Your face is so bright and delighted right now.
neurodivergent person talking about their hyperfixation.
You got that.
That's the face. No, actually, I was having a really interesting conversation about this with Eliza, who's in chat right now, right before I got on the stream. So I'm still like very pumped from it. But so we were talking about. Oh yeah, and someone else mentions Owl House as an inclusive way of portraying magic, and I 1000% agree with that. I started watching Owl House thinking it was just gonna be something I was gonna like watch in the background while I did art, and then I got really invested in it. But about the Arcana, the interesting thing about it is that actually in that world, the only times that you actually hear the word witch, it's used in a contemptuous way. It's used in a almost derogatory way. And if not specifically to upset, to at least annoy the characters. But the actual term that is being used is a gender neutral term, which is magician, and it ties a lot to the card of the magician in the tarot, which is connected to resourcefulness. So that for me is incredibly interesting, because resourcefulness is another element of magic that is very inclusive, a lot more inclusive than feminine power, and it is completely agender when it comes to like who can see themselves in it. And so the one of the main characters, Azra, who is connected to the card of the magician, is the perfect representation of magic as resourcefulness. But other characters, like the main character, is connected with the term magician, and the interesting thing about having a practicing magician as a main character who is a possible self-insert, it was a completely blank character that anyone can see themselves in, is endless options of representation. Like 3 years in the community, I've seen people insert all sorts of culture into the main character, and all sorts of expressions of magic and cultural influences, and even like time specific influences to the main character. And it's incredibly, I think, interesting to I'm on the older side of the fandom, in my 30s. A lot of people in the Arcana fandom are very young, and I think that it is wonderful for them to be able to enter a world that is already diverse, because the different characters are heavily inspired by different cultures. And then because it's set in a port city, in a city state, which is like a coastal city, is very heavily inspired by what Venice used to be. You have endless potential for cultural contamination in that context, and you see young people who really bring not only their own, but even feel comfortable experimenting with other cultures, with other influences that maybe wouldn't have been comfortable experimenting with as themselves, as their own person, in a non-fictional context. And it really gives way to so much creativity. For example, I'm writing an Arcana series right now, and I am inserting a lot of my personal passions when it comes to the paranormal, which are altered state of consciousness and specifically hypnosis, which like is nowhere in canon, but I see those themes in canon. I recognize some hinting, and I decide to take that and run with it. Someone else can see something entirely different, and they can choose to take that and run with it, or they can decide to bring something entirely of their own to it. So it's endless possibilities, really. And when it comes to shows like Mayfair, would like I don't mind shows that even like ignoring for a fact the fact that like we know that there are like more gender fluid characters to the cast, but even just watching the first episode, I don't mind media that centers femininity when it comes to witchcraft, because for me that is just a prompt to create an alternate version or create my own story. And the beautiful thing about media is that it's endless and it has endless possibilities. So when one kind of representation is out there, I don't see it as depriving me from an opportunity to create more, or to be able to inspire other creators to create more or explore the issue in a different way. It's just more media. What's bad about it?
That's so true.
Yeah. You are
there's a
amazing.
great line. She's great, isn't she? Great, Ashley. There's a great line though that I wanted to bring in here from Interview with the Vampire. The end of the first season. There's a line from Eric Bogosian's character Daniel Malloy where he's talking to Louis and he says, "Once it's out there, they make of it what they will." Right? Once a story is in the world, the author has very little control over where the world takes that story. Our chat has been mentioning J.K. Rowling and some of her incredibly terrible ideas that she has been forcing upon us. Not only, obviously, the transphobe stuff, but as somebody brought up, she's got fat phobia in her books, a lot of racism, classism, et cetera, et cetera. Those books are full of it. Here's what's happened, though. The Harry Potter fandom that grew up with those books and that world and those characters took that world and the core ideas that J.K. was espousing, which are karma, do unto others as you have them do unto you, acceptance and friendship and love. That's the story she was telling in spite of herself, honestly. And the audience has taken that world and those ideas and they've run with it. And they've built a universe, honestly, in our minds and in our own fan fiction and in our own conversations and the things that we've created as a generation because of what we were inspired by those books.
Yeah.
All of that stuff is better than what J.K. came up with. So I don't hate on her universe anymore. I don't have to hate Harry Potter, but that's a perfect example of the universe existing outside the author's control.
Yes, and
Fried
actually,
Pies and Moonshine. Oh, sorry. I was saying Fried Pies and Moonshine said HP belongs to the world now. And that's one of those things. Yep. Yeah, like and that's one of the beautiful things about fan fiction too. And I think that the Harry Potter community in particular has been like, look, bitch, no, this ain't yours. This is ours. And
if anyone... Yeah, no, if anyone has read Lovecraft, I mean, the amount of anti-Semitism in that, and then still, like the concept in it, and to be honest, like, in fact, since like high school, I reread it last summer again, and I was with a friend, and we were looking at it, and we were like, this is, not only is this anti-Semitic, this is poorly written, and yet the concepts in it inspired so much more, and actually some very inclusive media, and like you have a lot of Lovecraftian influence in Neil Gaiman, and look at what Neil Gaiman has done with fiction.
Absolutely. No, it's not enough. We need to have more representation as the answer. I'll go ahead and answer that for you. Everybody answer it, and Ashley will click our timer down here in a minute.
We just got a little time check from the crew.
Yeah.
This conversation has been amazing.
However, we want to get to a tarot reading, right? Are we going to do this after we have time? Do you have a hard out?
I think we do. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. All right, we're going to get to a tarot reading.
We definitely do.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
I think
I'm going to try to balance everything on my knees because I have a very small desk. And I have my laptop and everything in here.
Drakonish says, spiritually, I don't want to touch something that can benefit a horrible person directly. Friend, I hear you there. We just went to Universal Studios in the fall.
Totally get that.
And we did Harry Potter World, obviously. And this was one of my wife and I talked about it. I'm like, I don't know. Like, she gets some amount of the money that we spend here. Like, do we want to do that? The fact of the matter is, we love those characters so much. And our kids especially wanted to engage in those rides and those experiences. And again, the universe is for them. It's not for her anymore. And if she gets a few pennies on the back end, I'm just going to have to eat that. But you're right. It's so much better to support folks like the Owl House creators or what's the series that my daughter loves so much on Netflix? Centaur World. I don't know if you guys have seen that. That is a show that is full of LGBTQIA representation. Just very, very cool stuff there. All right. Let's keep going all the way through to the tarot setup here, Ashley. Just click through for us, and we'll get to this. Thanks, everybody, for spending time with us.
Okay.
Now you got it.
All right. Well, I came prepared.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Oz take the lead on this because of time, and I have a feeling that he's probably more involved. I'm sort of like a party trick tarot card reader, so I want to see the expert.
All right,
that's kind of where I'm at too, Liz. Like, I haven't done it regularly in probably 10 years, so I'm not as good as I used to be. But I mean, I've slept with my tarot cards under my pillow many a night.
I've got my deck here. I took a course in it, but it was mostly for storytelling. So I would love that.
Oh, Liz, you might actually have a similar background to mine. I do a lot of tarot for storytelling and also a lot of tarot for like self-reflection. That's what I like to do the most. Actually, it's great. You know what? It's great in relationships.
Yeah.
It's great in relationships because it's like I use it in my relationship a lot as a conversation prompt when it comes to like tackling issues, because it's very interesting to see what you see in the cards more so than what the cards are telling you. Like, what are you fishing for? What are you looking for in the cards? And that can sometimes bring out things that you wouldn't otherwise really even know were on your mind.
I have a question.
Just out of somebody pick left or right.
Oh, wait, Joel, you do it.
Cutting the deck.
Let's go left.
Okay. I'm doing a 3 card just to keep it quite simple. Past, present, and future. So, where are we all coming from? I'm doing this. Oh, by the way, I'm doing this with a specific person who's in chat in mind, but everyone feel free to see themselves. I just need to focus on one person in order to do this to begin with. So,
perfect.
We have as past the Lovers. And we all know the Lovers, but it's funny because when I first started doing tarot, I always tried to get a very romantic read of the Lovers every time. And sometimes I was misguided in that. And because the interesting thing about the Lovers is that it has to do with union, with collaboration, but it also has to do with duality, with the two sides of the same coin coming together and working together. And so to this person, I want to say that in their past, they learned how to work together. And if anyone else in chat has recently learned how to cooperate, it really is never too late to learn that. And it's one of the most valuable lessons we can learn in life. For our present, we have the Hermit. Lots of major arcana coming out to play today. And in the Hermit, at least in this context, I like to learn introspection because it comes right after the Lovers. And not necessarily loneliness. There's a poet that I'm very fond of, a Lebanese poet, Gibran, who wrote a beautiful book where when he talks about partnership and marriage, he talks about partnership in marriage should be like the columns of a temple who stand together but apart from each other. And so once you learn how to cooperate, the present would be to learn how to still be independent and be introspective. And our third card is the King of Swords. And the King of Swords represent action and ambition. And so I think that this falls in very nicely with what we've had so far. We've had, oh really, Eliza, that's your favorite minor arcana. Oh my gosh, I would really love to see your interpretation of it in this context. But I guess at this point, I'm following this nice road of growth and learning. And from learning how to stand together to learning how to introspect comes action and the power of an idea, the power of setting an idea in motion. And that is my past, present, and future for you today.
That's a great
I love
it.
I love the lesson of the Hermit.
It might relate to me directly.
You're right. I was just thinking, I edit podcasts for a living. That's what I do. And I edited a podcast today where someone was talking about like building a partnership and you have a tendency to grow together. The problem there is if you grow together,
Yes.
you are often leaning on one another in a way that you will fall. The whole thing falls. Whereas if you
Yes.
grow alongside of each other in times of weakness, when you need one another, the other one is there and strong, and you can go back and forth on who is, providing that stability in any given moment. But you have to provide your own foundation and existence, your own personality in a marriage. Ashley, you and I have,
Yes.
been at this for quite a while. You longer than me, but in our relationships, if all we are is the partner of the other, not only do you lose yourself, you lose your partner, because that's not
Yes.
somebody anybody wants to spend time with.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing about having a good giving partner who is a true partner in the sense of that word, and not just a boyfriend, girlfriend, non-binary pal, whatever. It is it is like a partnership is really what's important, whether it's a
I
marriage or
agree.
not. Like it's in your long-term relationships, and learning how to communicate and grow together. And my husband and I have been together almost 20 years, and we stayed up until 7
Mhm.
a.m. the other morning playing a silly game and just laughing at each other and having the most fun. And I think that to me is like such a gift. And the only thing that I could give to other people is like, have fun with your partner. My God, there's so much
I
stress and hardness out there.
Thank you, Mystic
I
Rock.
agree. And when it comes to partnership and individuality, I guess I can bring my 2 cents as someone who is non-monogamous, and I've been with I'm married. I've been with my husband for 9 years, and I have a girlfriend of now over 2 years, and the three of us have actually, despite the fact that like they're not connected to each other, the three of us have actually collaborated on creative projects, and we've been like so incredibly successful in it because we are very very communicative, and we are very structured and very rooted in who we are and what we are to each other.
Liz,
Hell yes.
Liz. Oh, so perfectly said. You got to say that out loud.
I have to confess, it's from a book called How to Choose Your Partner that my stepmom gave me after my divorce, and it worked. Something worked. I have a lovely partner right now, but it was just one of those phrases that
Yes.
like distilled everything for me. But that love is not two people gazing at one another, but standing side by side, staring in the same direction. So you have this common goal and can be working together, and that's never questioned, and there's room for improvisation in between. So
Hell
And
yeah.
I'll
Liz,
say, I'll just say
Liz, on
quickly
that.
because we got to wrap it up. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Oh,
Liz.
oh yeah, no, I was just gonna tell Liz, because this reminded me of what she said, that the book that I was mentioning before, the bit about marriage, said something very similar about, it's like the strings of an instrument that are playing the same music but are never entangled with each other.
Yes, they
I love
vibrate in
that.
sync,
I'm
right?
gonna
They vibrate in
die.
harmony. Listen, and I just want to say thank you so much, Eliza. That is this whole thing. All that was just said. It's not just about romantic love either, right? That can be any creative
Yes.
partnership, a business partnership. When you connect as two human beings and you can work alongside each other, not codependently, but independently together. That's really powerful. And I think that's what we're going to see in this show. I think we're going to see a lot of women coming together, not in a romantic sense, but for a united purpose. Whether that purpose will be bent towards their own ends or lashers, we'll have to see. But thank you, everybody, for joining us so much. Quickly, I want to say you can see more of me and Ashley, or you can hear more of Ashley and I, Articulate Coven. We're everywhere you listen to podcasts, and we're and on our Facebook group, and we've got a Discord community as well. You can find us there. Liz, you're here at Dorian, I'm assuming. Where else can people find you online?
That's correct. You can find me on Instagram at Liz Tingue, Tingue, or eTingue, actually. Gosh, sorry. And the Twitter at Liz Tingue, and I'm Liz at Dorian.live if anyone would like to get in touch on Dorian. You can also follow all of us through the little feature. If you tap the blue button on the top of the screen, you can follow each of us here on Dorian.
That's right. Where can folks find you?
So on Dorian, I am Azrian Route, and I am Azrian Route as well on Instagram for my art. Well, for my personal Instagram, I'm Azra Bounding.
Excellent, excellent. Ashley, tell everybody where they can find you other than the podcast.
I am pretty much Ashley Wright Eiler at all of the things. So IHLER is the Eiler portion from my lovely Norwegian husband, Norwegian heritage husband. So yeah, you can find me on there, on Facebook, on Instagram. I'd love to chat. Also, like, I'm really hoping to be more active on Dorian, to be honest. I'm really interested in what you guys are bringing to the table, and I mean, I'm so smitten with Az right now. I really think Joel and I need to have Az on our podcast.
Oh, I think in particular, I think there are a few of Anne Rice's books that the Jewish mysticism could very much inform discussions of, if nothing else.
No!
So we will be circling back on that. Thanks so much to everybody who hung out and listened. And by the way, if you came in, I noticed a couple of people mention, oh, I hate that I missed the first of this. If you came in late, I've got the audio of this saved. It's going to go out on our podcast. So follow Articulate Coven everywhere you listen to podcasts, and you'll be able to listen to it there. Thanks everybody for joining us. And we're going to do another one of these for the finale party of the Mayfairs right after the finale premieres. So you got about 8 weeks before you'll see us again here in an official capacity. But thanks again, everybody, and have a great night. Ashley, you're going to have to wrap it up for us.
End it. Let's see if I can figure out how to do it. Stay tuned for that. Bye, y'all. Thank Azra Bounding for joining us. Tap the blue button at the top of the screen, which I do not see. Follow Azra Bounding on Dorian to get notified every time he goes live or releases a new episode. We can't wait to play your Mayfair Witches games. Hell yeah!
Yes. Templates come out
Happy
tomorrow.
creating!
Yes, so create for that. Thanks, everyone.
Templates come out tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.
Did I not end it? Jesus. If I just leave?
Yep, just leave. It's just you.